You know, there are some stories that just grab you by the collar and don't let go. You think you know how they're going to end, but then they take a hard turn you never saw coming. The best revenge, they say, is living well. But sometimes, when you've been burned that bad, living well isn't enough. You need to make sure the person who lit the match feels the heat too. This is a story about a woman named Linda who thought she had it all: a home, a husband-to-be, and a future she had meticulously planned. But in one cold, cruel afternoon, her perfect life was surgically removed from her, leaving her with nothing. Nothing but the memory of a stolen pearl necklace and the cold, hard realization that her entire life was a lie. What she didn't know was that being left for a paralyzed billionaire would turn her into an avenging angel, ready to tear down the world of the people who betrayed her.
And boy, did she get her revenge. This is Revenge Emmy, and this is the story of how my fiancé abandoned me, forcing me to become a living nurse for a paralyzed billionaire.
The city lights blurred past my windshield as my hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The 20-minute drive from Eleanor Hamilton's house to the apartment I'd shared with William felt like a lifetime. Each mile was a cold, hard slap of reality. The perfect life I thought I was living had just been surgically excised from me. And I was still standing, still breathing, still in shock. I pulled into our building's parking garage, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead. My designated spot was a mocking reminder of the life I no longer had, right next to William's empty one where his BMW usually sat. Of course he wasn't home. He was probably at Victoria's penthouse, toasting their efficient disposal of me with champagne that cost more than my monthly student loan payment. The apartment door opened to darkness and the smell of his cologne lingering in the air like a ghost. I flipped the light switch and there he was, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows we'd picked out together. He was still in his scrubs from his morning shift. He didn't turn around when I entered. He just stood there, looking out at the city lights as if they held answers to questions he hadn't bothered to ask. "We need to talk," he said to the window. And those 4 words, despite everything that had just happened, made my knees buckle. The scene at his mother's house had been Act 1. This was the finale. "I think your mother and Victoria covered everything pretty thoroughly," I managed, the sarcasm a thin, necessary armor. I set my purse on the console table where our engagement photo still sat in its silver frame, a relic from a time that now felt like a different lifetime. William finally turned, his face holding the same detached expression he wore when delivering a terminal diagnosis. No emotion, just clinical fact. "They shouldn't have done that," he said. "I wanted to handle this myself." "How considerate," I replied, my voice sounding hollow and far away. He reached into his laptop bag and produced a manila envelope thick with documents. Everything about William required documentation, evidence, a paper trail that proved his efficiency. "I've handled all the logistics," he said, sliding the envelope across our dining table. "The lease transfers to my name exclusively next week. Your name has been removed from the joint accounts as of this morning. The wedding venue was canceled 48 hours ago, along with the photographer and caterer." 48 hours ago. While I was addressing save the dates in my careful cursive, practicing my new signature, Linda Hamilton, he was already erasing our future with the same methodical precision he used to excise a tumor. "The moving company arrives tomorrow at noon," he continued, as if I were an item on his to-do list being checked off. "Everything will be professionally packed and placed in a storage unit. The first month is paid." "How generous." My voice came out as a whisper. "Victoria and I share something you and I never could," he said. And for the first time, emotion crept into his voice. Not regret or sadness, but excitement. Her father's connections will fast-track my career in ways that would take decades otherwise. The department chair position is essentially guaranteed by 35. The Piton Medical Technology Initiative will revolutionize spinal surgery. This is bigger than personal feelings. Our wedding is in 3 weeks, I said, the words automatic, pointless. Was, he corrected. And that date will serve a different purpose now. The venue was too good to waste. The cruelty of his efficiency took my breath away. He transferred our wedding to Victoria like a dinner reservation, swapping brides with the casual indifference of changing a surgery schedule. I need the ring back, he said, gesturing to my bare finger. You already gave it to your mother, I replied. The one you were wearing. Grandmother's original setting. I'd switched rings after the meeting at his mother's house, putting on the original heirloom setting I'd worn before Eleanor insisted on modernizing it. My last act of defiance, keeping this one piece of our history. But William knew me too well, anticipated even my small rebellions. My fingers fumbled with the platinum band, shaking so badly I dropped it. The ring hit the granite countertop with a sound like a gavel pronouncing sentence. I placed it carefully beside the envelope, fighting the urge to throw it at his head. Thank you for your clarity, I said, the words scraping my throat raw. William pocketed the ring with the same automatic motion he used for his phone, already dismissing its significance. He actually checked his watch then, as if I were making him late for something more important. I have evening rounds, he said, moving toward the door. I suggest you pack efficiently. The movers won't wait if you're not ready. The door closed with a soft click that echoed through the apartment. Our apartment. My apartment for exactly 6 more days. I stood frozen in the living room for minutes, or hours. Time had lost meaning. Then, mechanically, I walked to our bedroom and began the archaeology of betrayal. Every drawer I opened revealed another layer of deception. Restaurant receipts from Marquisi's, where we'd planned to hold our rehearsal dinner, were dated weeks ago with charges for 2. A Parker pen from Piton Pharmaceuticals was tucked into his sock drawer. Victoria's business card was in his medical journal, the corners soft from handling. The closet held my wedding dress like an accusation. Vera Wang ivory silk. A small fortune I'd justified because you only get married once. The tag was still attached, the receipt in my name alone because William had insisted I should have the dress I wanted. Now I understood. He'd been ensuring the debt would follow me, not him. I pulled suitcases from the top shelf and began folding my life into compartments. Each item held memory shrapnel. The blue dress I'd worn to his white coat ceremony. The fleece pajamas he'd bought me during my first winter in the apartment, when I'd complained about the cold. The jewelry box that held the pearl earrings he'd given me last Christmas, which I now recognized as pieces Victoria had probably discarded. By the door, I found boxes William's mother had pre-labeled with her perfect penmanship. Linda, kitchen items. Linda, personal documents. Linda, miscellaneous. She'd prepared for my removal weeks ago, maybe months. Each box was labeled like evidence in a storage unit, reducing 4 years to categorical items that could be efficiently removed. At 2 a.m., I opened my laptop to face financial reality. The checking account showed a balance of $247.83. The wedding deposits, venue, photographer, flowers, catering, totaled $15,000, all non-refundable according to contracts William had encouraged me to sign quickly to secure our dates. My credit cards were maxed from bridesmaids' gifts, the engagement party I'd thrown, the honeymoon flights I'd booked as a surprise. My previous apartment had been rented 6 weeks ago when I didn't renew the lease. William had said it was silly to pay for a place I never used. Every financial decision had been choreographed to leave me with nothing when he made his exit. I sat on the floor of our building's lobby at 3 in the morning, surrounded by boxes labeled with my name like evidence of a crime, scrolling through apartment listings that might as well have been written in a foreign language. Studio apartment, first and last month required, credit check mandatory. Every listing was a door slammed in my face before I could even knock. My phone screen blurred through tears I refused to let fall. And then Dorothy Martinez's name appeared in my recent calls. My foster mother. The last person I'd spoken to before my world imploded. My thumb hovered over her number for a full minute before shame gave way to desperation. She answered on the second ring, her voice clear despite the hour. "Linda, what's wrong, sweetheart?" The sob that escaped me told her everything. "Can I come over?" "I'm already putting the kettle on." Dorothy's townhouse sat on a quiet street lined with oak trees, the kind of neighborhood where people still knew each other's names. She opened the door before I could knock, wearing the same flannel nightgown she'd worn the night she first took me in as a foster child 15 years ago. Without a word, she helped me carry boxes into her spare room, the one with Noah's Ark wallpaper that had witnessed a parade of broken children before me. The room smelled like lavender sachets and old books, exactly as I remembered. A new quilt lay folded on the twin bed, the price tag hastily removed, but the corners still visible. On the nightstand sat a framed photo from my nursing school graduation, Dorothy beaming beside me in my cap and gown. She had made space for me before I even knew I'd need it. "Tea first, explanations later," she said, leading me to her kitchen where copper pots hung from hooks and herbs grew in mason jars on the windowsill. She pulled out the chipped blue mug she'd designated as mine when I was 13, the one with a hairline crack that somehow never leaked. The chamomile tea tasted like safety, like all the nights she'd sat with me through foster care nightmares and teenage heartbreaks. "William left me for Victoria Petton," I said, the words falling like stones into still water. "The wedding's off. I have nowhere to go." Dorothy didn't gasp or offer platitudes. She simply opened her arms, and I collapsed into them, sobbing into her nightgown while she rocked me with the practiced comfort of someone who'd raised dozens of children, who weren't hers, but somehow were. Her refrigerator, I noticed through my tears, held my favorite brand of strawberry yogurt. The bathroom had a new toothbrush in purple, my preferred color. She'd been preparing for my return, like a prophecy she'd hoped wouldn't come true. "Stay as long as you need," she whispered into my hair. "This is your home. It always has been." For 3 days, I existed in a grief cocoon, barely leaving the guest room except for meals Dorothy insisted I eat. She didn't push for details, didn't offer advice, just brought me soup and sat quietly while I stared at job listings on my laptop. My savings wouldn't cover a security deposit anywhere decent. The hospital had already adjusted my schedule per William's request, relegating me to night shifts and pediatric care, where we'd never cross paths. On the third evening, Dorothy knocked softly and entered carrying tea and a folder. "My cousin Marjorie called from Hartman Placement Agency," she said. "There's a position that's been open for months. It's unusual." She set the folder on my bed, and the number on the compensation package made me blink twice. $15,000 a month, plus accommodations, meals, and benefits. It was more than triple my hospital salary. "What's the catch?" I asked, because there was always a catch. The patient is Nathaniel Blackwood. Dorothy's expression grew careful. The tech billionaire who had that skiing accident 8 months ago. He's paralyzed, and he's difficult. 4 nurses have quit in 2 months. One lasted only 3 days. I recognized the name from business headlines William used to read aloud over breakfast. Nathaniel Blackwood, the prodigy who'd built a medical technology empire before turning 35, the same age William planned to make department chair with the Piton's help. They say he's impossible, Dorothy continued. Potentially violent in his frustration. Completely isolated in that mansion of his in Westfield Heights. But Linda, the money would set you up for life. 6 months there, and you could start over anywhere, running away. That's what this was. But staying meant watching William and Victoria's ascent from the shadows. Meant accepting the night shift relegation. Meant existing in a city where every street corner held a memory of what I'd lost. I picked up the folder and dialed the number before I could reconsider. The interview was scheduled for the next morning at Margaret Harrison's downtown office. The building's lobby gleamed with the kind of marble that whispered old money, and the elevator to the 42nd floor moved so smoothly I barely felt it. Margaret Harrison's office looked like it had been carved from a glacier, all clean lines and cutting edges. She herself matched the decor. Steel gray hair pulled into a bun so tight it seemed to stretch her features. A charcoal suit pressed with military precision. "Miss Carter," she said, not standing, gesturing to a chair across from her glass desk. "I've reviewed your credentials. 5 years of nursing experience, a specialization in trauma care, excellent references from Helena General. Tell me why you want this position." "I need to disappear," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. "My life here has become untenable." She studied me with eyes that missed nothing. "Personal crisis? Financial trouble? Legal issues?" "My fiancé left me for Victoria Petton 3 weeks before our wedding. I have no home, no savings, and no desire to remain in the same city where they're building their empire." Something shifted in Margaret's expression, so subtle I almost missed it. "The Pettons. Do you have any ongoing connection to that family?" "Only that they destroyed my life." She was quiet for a long moment, then slid a contract across the desk. "Mr. Blackwood requires absolute discretion. No visitors to the estate. No personal calls during duty hours. No discussion of his condition or recovery with anyone, ever. He's brilliant, bitter, and will test every boundary you have. He doesn't tolerate pity, sentiment, or weakness. Can you handle that?" I thought of William's clinical dissection of our relationship, his mother's pre-labeled boxes, Victoria wearing my grandmother's pearls. "I can handle anything that doesn't involve the life I just lost. Sign here." I signed without reading the fine print, without asking about the other nurses who'd fled. Without questioning why a billionaire's estate manager seemed to recognize pain like my own. The contract felt like a door closing on one life and opening onto another. The next morning, a black town car arrived at Dorothy's house. She hugged me goodbye, pressed a photo of us into my hand, and whispered, "You're stronger than you know." The drive to Westfield Heights took an hour, winding through neighborhoods where houses grew progressively larger until they weren't houses anymore, but estates, compounds, small kingdoms behind gates and walls. The Blackwood estate appeared like something from a fever dream, all glass and steel angles that seemed to reject the softness of the surrounding hills. The gates opened silently, admitting us to a driveway that curved through gardens so precisely maintained they looked artificial. Margaret met me at the entrance, her expression giving nothing away. "Your suite is in the east wing," she said, leading me through corridors where our footsteps echoed despite thick carpeting. "You'll have privacy, but remain accessible. Mr. Blackwood's rooms are directly adjacent." The suite was larger than any apartment I could have afforded, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a valley that seemed to exist in a different world from the one I'd left. A king-size bed, a sitting area, a bathroom with a soaking tub that could fit 3 people. It was beautiful, cold, and felt like an expensive prison. Margaret handed me a keycard, a pager, and a final warning. "He'll test you immediately. Don't take it personally." Margaret left me standing in my suite with those words echoing in the silence. I sat down my single suitcase, the pager heavy in my pocket, and walked to the adjacent door that connected to Nathaniel Blackwood's rooms. The mahogany door stood like a barrier between my old life and whatever waited beyond. I knocked twice, received no response, and entered anyway. Margaret had been clear that waiting for permission wasn't part of the protocol. The room beyond took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated the western wall, late afternoon sun painting everything gold. Modern furniture in blacks and grays created sharp lines against the warm light. Original artwork hung on the walls. I recognized a Rothko, though I couldn't be sure it was genuine until I remembered whose house this was. Everything whispered money, but underneath lurked something else. An isolation. A life interrupted. Nathaniel Blackwood sat with his wheelchair facing the windows, his back to me, shoulders rigid beneath an expensive black sweater. Even from behind, his presence filled the space with an intensity that made the air feel thin. I cleared my throat to announce myself, but he spoke without turning. "Another one. Margaret's getting desperate if she's pulling from the discount bin now." The casual cruelty might have stung if I hadn't spent the last week being systematically destroyed by people I trusted. Instead, I moved further into the room, my footsteps deliberate on the hardwood floor. "I'm Linda Carter, your new nurse." He spun the wheelchair with surprising speed, and I understood immediately why the other nurses had fled. Nathaniel Blackwood was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. Dark hair that fell just past his collar, stormy gray eyes, cheekbones that belonged on classical statues. But his expression transformed that beauty into a weapon. Pure disdain radiated from him, the kind of contempt that comes from pain transformed into armor. "Tell me," he said, his voice cultured and sharp as broken crystal. "What tragedy sent you running to this position? Divorce? Death? Financial ruin? Or are you one of those noble types who thinks caring for the broken will fill the void in your empty life?" My fiancé left me for Victoria Peton 3 weeks before our wedding. The words came out flat, factual. So yes, I'm here because I have nowhere else to go. But I'm also here because I'm excellent at my job. And frankly, Mr. Blackwood, your bitterness doesn't intimidate me. Something flickered across his features, surprise maybe, or recognition. He studied me with those storm-gray eyes, and I refused to look away. "Victoria Peton," he repeated slowly. "Marcus Peton's daughter, the pharmaceutical princess." "The same." "And you're what? Looking for revenge? Planning to steal medications? Or just hiding from your humiliation?" "I'm here to work. Your emotional state isn't my concern unless it affects your medical care."
We'll pick up our story right there in the heart of the wreckage. where a kiss on a terrace leads to an epic showdown in a boardroom. But before we continue, I want to take a moment to ask you something. Have you ever been so betrayed that you felt you had to take matters into your own hands? Have you ever had to stop being the nice guy and fight back? If you have, tell me your story. The comments section below is a safe space for you to share. And don't forget to show your support for this channel by hitting that like button and subscribing to Revenge Emmy. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life, reminding people that while some betrayals are personal, some revenges are for a greater cause. I'll see you in a minute.
The morning air outside Blackwood Industries headquarters felt electric against my skin as we stepped from the car. Nathaniel paused at the building's entrance, adjusting his Tom Ford suit one final time. His cane, polished mahogany with a silver handle, wasn't for show anymore. It was a weapon, and he wielded it like one. "Ready?" I asked, holding his portfolio of evidence. "I've been ready for months," he replied, then looked at me directly. "Stay close. I want them to see you." The elevator ride to the 40th floor lasted seconds that felt like hours. Other passengers stepped aside instinctively, sensing something predatory in Nathaniel's bearing. When the doors opened to the executive floor, the receptionist's eyes widened. She'd been told Nathaniel Blackwood would arrive in a wheelchair, assisted, diminished. Instead, he strode past her desk with measured steps, each placement of his cane against the marble echoing through the hallway like a countdown. The boardroom doors were already open. Inside, 12 board members sat around the massive oval table, with Marcus Piton positioned at what should have been Nathaniel's seat. Victoria perched beside him in midnight blue, diamonds at her throat. William sat to her left, medical files spread before him like props in a play he didn't know had already ended. The collective gasp when Nathaniel walked through those doors was audible. Marcus Piton's face drained of color so quickly I thought he might faint. Victoria's perfect composure cracked, her hand flying to her throat. But it was William's reaction that fed my soul. He actually started to stand as if to run, before his legs gave out, and he collapsed back into his chair. Nathaniel walked the length of the room with deliberate precision, his cane striking the marble in rhythm with my heartbeat. He didn't hurry, didn't rush. He let them absorb every step, every impossible movement of his supposedly paralyzed body. When he reached the chairman's position, his position, he remained standing. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, his voice carrying perfect authority. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding about my capacity." The way he emphasized capacity while looking directly at William made my ex-fiancé shrink into his expensive suit. I took my position beside Nathaniel, placing the portfolio on the table with deliberate weight. "You're walking," Marcus finally managed, his voice strangled. "Astute observation," Nathaniel replied, lowering himself into his chair with controlled grace. "Though, according to Dr. Morris's medical assessment, that should be impossible. Isn't that right, Doctor?" William's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "The reports. Your paralysis was documented by you," Nathaniel interrupted. "Based on confidential medical information you were never authorized to access, much less share with outside parties." He opened the portfolio, pulling out the first set of documents. "Shall we discuss your communications with Miss Piton?" These emails dated back 4 months. "Interesting how they predate your official consultation by 2 months." I watched Victoria's face as Nathaniel read selected passages aloud. Her romance with William, their plan to eliminate obstacles, The timeline that proved my abandonment was orchestrated. Each word stripped away her polish until only panic remained. "This proves nothing," Marcus blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," Nathaniel said, pulling out more documents. "Then let's discuss the shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, prepared to receive my patent transfers. Or perhaps we should review the stock movements that coincidentally aligned with Dr. Morris's false medical reports." Patricia Coleman stood then, her presence commanding attention. "What Mr. Blackwood is presenting constitutes evidence of conspiracy, corporate espionage, HIPAA violations, insider trading, and attempted theft of intellectual property. You can't prove intent," Marcus said desperately. Nathaniel smiled, cold and sharp. "Actually, I can." He pulled out a tablet, tapping the screen. Marcus's voice filled the room from the speakers. "He's too broken to fight back. The board will side with active leadership. The crippled genius is ripe for harvesting." The recording continued, capturing their entire conversation from that morning in the mansion. Every damning word was preserved by the security system they'd dismissed as another sign of Nathaniel's paranoia. "Recording without consent is illegal," Victoria said, her voice shaking. "Not in my own home," Nathaniel replied smoothly. "And not when it captures conspiracy to commit fraud." This was my moment. William had been avoiding my eyes, but now he looked up, desperate, trying to form words that might salvage something. "Linda, you don't understand the full picture." I stood slowly, placing my hands flat on the table, feeling the cool wood beneath my palms. "I understand perfectly. You violated your medical oath, betrayed your patient's confidentiality, and destroyed our relationship to climb into bed with the Petons." Victoria's sharp intake of breath confirmed what I'd suspected. They weren't just professional partners. "Professionally and literally, it seems," I continued, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. "You traded me for an alliance that's now worthless. How does it feel to be the one abandoned?" The board members shifted uncomfortably. Several were already whispering to each other, distancing themselves from the Peton sinking ship. "This is ridiculous," Marcus stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "We're leaving." "Sit down," Nathaniel commanded, and the authority in his voice was absolute. Patricia Coleman stepped forward, her briefcase opening with a click that sounded like a trap springing. "Mr. Peton, you have two options. Option 1, immediate withdrawal of all claims on Blackwood Industries, signed agreements barring any future contact with Mr. Blackwood or his companies, and your resignation from the hospital board. Option 2, we proceed with criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" William's voice cracked. "Corporate espionage, HIPAA violations, attempted theft of intellectual property, insider trading," Patricia listed calmly. "The FBI's white-collar crime division has already been briefed, pending the outcome of this meeting." "You wouldn't dare," Victoria said, but her voice was hollow. "I would," Nathaniel replied. "Unless you sign these documents now." The boardroom fell silent, except for the scratch of pens on paper. One by one they signed, Marcus's hand shaking with rage, Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers trembling. William signed his name like he was signing his own death certificate. As they filed out, broken and defeated, William lingered at the door. "This isn't over," he said quietly, trying for menace but achieving only desperation. I met his eyes one last time, Yes, it is. You ended it 3 weeks ago. I'm just returning the favor. The boardroom door clicked shut behind William, leaving Nathaniel and me alone with the board members who sat in stunned silence. The aftermath of destruction often feels hollow, but this felt like breathing clean air after years of suffocation. Nathaniel remained seated, his hand finding mine beneath the table, fingers interlacing with quiet certainty. Gentlemen, ladies, he addressed the remaining board members. I believe we have a company to rebuild. The vote to reinstate his full authority was unanimous. No one wanted to be associated with the Pitons' failed coup. As the board members filed out, murmuring apologies and assurances of support, Nathaniel's attorney, Patricia Coleman, approached us with a satisfied smile. The Pitons' assets are already being frozen pending investigation, she said. William Morris won't practice medicine in this state again. Maybe not anywhere. The words should have brought satisfaction, but I felt only a strange emptiness where my anger had lived. Nathaniel seemed to sense it, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. Come with me, he said once Patricia left. There's something I want to show you. His office overlooked the entire city, with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a view that made the world feel conquerable. But it wasn't the view he wanted to show me. From his desk drawer, he pulled out architectural plans, spreading them across the surface where minutes ago we'd destroyed our enemies. The east wing of the estate, he said, pointing to the blueprints. 12,000 square feet, currently in use. I want to transform it into something that matters. The plans showed a rehabilitation center with state-of-the-art equipment, treatment rooms, and therapeutic pools. But it was the name at the top that stopped my breathing. The Blackwood Carter Rehabilitation Center. Your spinal cord stimulation technology, I whispered, understanding flooding through me. You want to make it available to patients who can't afford traditional treatment. I want to make it available to everyone, he corrected. But I need someone to run the clinical site. Someone who understands that recovery isn't just about the body, but about refusing to let circumstances define you. He slid a velvet box across the desk. My hands trembled as I opened it, expecting jewelry, but finding instead a simple silver key. Full partnership, he said. Equity stake. Your name on the door beside mine. You'll run the clinical operations while I handle the technology development. Nathaniel, I'm not qualified for this. I'm just a nurse. You're the only one who saw me when I was invisible, he interrupted, his voice fierce. You stayed when everyone else would have run. You understood what I needed when I didn't even know myself. That's all the qualification I need. The key weighed nothing in my palm, but it felt like holding my entire future. Not the future I'd planned with William, safe and predictable, but something I'd never dared to imagine. Yes, I said, and his smile transformed his entire face. 6 months passed in a blur of construction, hiring, and equipment installation. The center took shape like a dream becoming solid. Each room was designed for dignity, hope, and recovery. Dorothy Martinez was my first hire, bringing her decades of experience to head our patient advocacy program. She'd cried when I offered her the position, saying she always knew I was meant for something extraordinary. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew medical professionals from across the country. I stood beside Nathaniel, who now walked with only the slightest limp, scissors poised over the silver ribbon. The crowd included reporters, doctors, and potential donors, but my eyes found Dorothy in the front row, beaming with pride. The Blackwood Carter Rehabilitation Center represents more than medical innovation, Nathaniel addressed the crowd. It represents the belief that our worst moments don't define us. That from destruction, we can build something beautiful. His hand found mine as we cut the ribbon together. The applause was thunderous, but I barely heard it. That morning's newspaper sat in my office. William and Victoria's wedding announcement was tucked into the society pages. A small, rushed affair at a courthouse. The article mentioned that the Piton fortune had evaporated in legal fees and frozen assets. Victoria had learned too late that William's loyalty was always negotiable, always for sale to the highest bidder. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not anger. Just a mild pity for Victoria, who'd thought she was trading up. "You've become who you were meant to be," Dorothy whispered when she hugged me after my speech. And I believed her. Our first patient arrived that afternoon, a 22-year-old motorcycle accident victim named Jaime. Watching Nathaniel work with her, explaining the technology he'd developed, showing her the possible futures ahead, I saw the man he'd been before his accident. Brilliant, passionate, and changing lives with his mind and determination. 3 weeks later, on a sunset walk along the private beach below the estate, Nathaniel stopped where the waves met the sand. The October air was cool, autumn painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and my heart stuttered. "I'm not asking you to marry me because I need you," he said, opening it to reveal a simple sapphire ring. "I'm asking because I've learned that the best revenge against those who tried to break us is to build something they could never imagine, never touch, never be. Build it with me, Linda. Not from desperation or convenience, but from choice." I took the ring myself, sliding it onto my finger where it fit perfectly. When I kissed him, the ocean was our only witness. Waves erased our footprints as we walked back, leaving no trace of where we'd been, only where we were going. A month later, standing in our facility, I watched Nathaniel help Jamie take her first unassisted steps. Her parents wept openly, her younger sister recording everything on her phone. This was what we'd built from our mutual destruction. Not just a rehabilitation center, but a place where broken people could discover they were never really broken at all. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The preview showed William's name, words about mistakes, and wanting to talk. I deleted it without reading the rest, then took Nathaniel's hand as our next patient arrived. We'd both been destroyed by people who thought we were disposable. William had thrown me away for a better opportunity. The Petons had tried to bury Nathaniel while he was still breathing. But from that wreckage, we'd built something neither of us could have achieved whole. A love born from revenge, but transformed into purpose, into healing, into something that belonged only to us.
If this story of a woman's calculated revenge and unexpected love kept you hooked until the very end, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Linda stood in that boardroom and told William exactly how it felt to be the one abandoned. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more captivating stories like this. Subscribe to Revenge Emmy and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.